Welcome to Step Away from the Table, Beyond the Table. The podcast for pet groomers ready to start their next chapter. Let's explore what's possible when you trade in the grooming table for the freedom of virtual work. Whether you're done with the physical toll or just craving more flexibility, you're in the right place. We're staying in the pet industry, just shifting how we show up. So take a breath, step away from the table, and let's see what's waiting for you on the other side.
Hey, friends, and welcome back to Step Away from the Table, Beyond the Table, the podcast for virtual assistants who work behind the scenes in the grooming industry. And are you ready to stop lighting yourself on fire to keep everybody warm? So, I am your host. My name is Riverly, and in today's episode, it's one of those that someone handed me years ago, okay? Because we're talking about something that no one warns about when you become a virtual assistant, how you can't support everyone. You're trying to burn yourself out faster than the workload ever could. This episode is going to be for you if you already feel emotionally exhausted after client conversations, you're the calm one when your groomers are spiraling, you take on stress or responsibility that isn't technically yours, and you're starting to wonder if being a virtual assistant is even a sustainable career choice for you long term. So we're going to talk about emotional labor, boundaries, and being a virtual assistant in a way that you can actually last, okay? So being a virtual assistant means so many different things to so many different people, and that's really, really important because it's not just scheduling or answering calls. It's not just, helping your supervisors with little mini fires or helping them figure things out, right? Or social media. It's often translating stress messages from pet owners who maybe don't understand, have a financial question, etc. Holding space for an overwhelmed business owner, right? Your supervisor might be sitting there saying, oh my God, how am I going to hit this financial goal? Or how am I going to be able to work with these clients, right? Because maybe they have built an entire business around the wrong soulmate clients, and you're often de-escalating emotional situations. We often talk about how you need to know what your role is as a virtual assistant, right? Are you in a role where you are just going to be able to sit there, relax, and just schedule appointments or help them create systems? Like, what is your role in that business? And we know that groomers are physically exhausted, emotionally drained, and often undercharging and overworking, right? And you can't be the one to sit there and coach them through that because that's not your job as a virtual assistant. Virtual assistants are not business coaches. And usually in the middle of a shave down season, as we're coming into that season, you're going to notice that your supervisor and or their staff are going to be increasingly more and more and more stressed out, let's be honest, right? And often because we've been in the grooming industry, they're going to vent to us more because we know exactly what they're going through. They can't talk to their partners. They can't talk to their moms, their dads, right? They can't talk to those people because when they say things, it sounds like, oh, no big deal. But we know the stress that comes with this job. But, and this is a big but, okay? Sometimes being helpful turns into over accommodation or you're over giving for the role that you're in. So I understand you care. I understand that you want to do a good job. You don't want to disappoint anybody and you don't want to be quote unquote difficult, which I hate. I hate like the whole be a good girl kind of situation that we find ourselves in a lot of times in society. Your job is not necessarily to hold space for those people. You've got to navigate the in between. You've got to navigate between being understanding, being kind, but holding your own emotional boundaries, right? You're not a pet groomer's therapist, and you're certainly not their business coach. And a lot of times what happens is that when you're a virtual assistant, things can get really blurred. And again, some of you guys may be hired to hit a certain sales goal. Some of you guys might have the freedom and flexibility where they say, listen, if you want the level of autonomy, we've got to see results. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is when a business owner will have policies in place where they say, hey, please don't book anybody last minute. And then you're not hitting the goals for, let's say, for the business where they want to hit, let's say, for easy math, $1,000 a week. And in order to teach those clients to rebook, in order to teach those clients to book out 2, 3 days in the week, ahead of time, they may see the last minute calls and then you're not booking them. And you need to reiterate to them that your job is to follow the policies. If they would like to change the policies, or if they'd like to have a sale or a temporary change, that's a very different conversation. But your job is not to ride the emotional roller coaster with them. And a lot of groomers do. A lot of groomers will see that high in November, December, and they're making great money and they're having a great time. And then, oops, January, February happens. You start seeing a slump, no calls, they start panicking. And then when shave down seasons, all of a sudden, their plan of once a year, twice a year dogs, no more matted shave downs goes out the window because they saw all this money and then they saw the slump. So you as a virtual assistant, you have to be very clear with what you will do and will not do. For me, I highly suggest that if you have created policies and procedures, you have to abide by them and you have to tell them, listen, you have told me these are the rules. If you'd like to change the rules, I will abide by the rules, but the rules can't be, do this, then do that. And the example that I always use is like the couch with a dog. You can't be the kind of owner who, either the dog's allowed on the couch or they're not, right? Either the dog can be on the couch with you, hang with you, chill with you, and get on and off as they please. You can even have a rule that the dog can't come on the couch unless if they're called. That's fine. But what you can't have a rule about is sometimes the dog can come on the couch even when called, but not always. And when the sun is in the Eastern Hemisphere, then he can come on the couch, but only when I feel like it. It's too confusing, right? Very black and white. And I highly suggest as a virtual assistant that you make your policies and procedures as black and white as possible. If they want to lean in gray, you can say, listen, if you want to do if this, then that kind of rules, I'm totally here for it. No one's your clients unless it is these breeds, these clients, etc. No problem. But, you know, saying basically having a vibe, feeling it, that is not a sustainable way for you to do business. And as we go from these financial slumps in January, February, especially this year with how much weather there's been, a lot of your mobiles are having tons of energy rescheduling, and your shops will probably reschedule people a lot. I know I had this kind of situation with all the snow, and I think it was 2014. I had my shop and it literally snowed every single weekend. And I had to cancel every week my Sunday cats and I had to cancel the end of my Saturday. And it was just crazy, like every week for like 5 or 6 weeks. It was over a month. And then a lot of people were snowed in because we got like 5 feet of snow. It was like snowmageddon. So if I had had a virtual assistant, I'm sure at that time they would have had a lot of stresses. So, as a virtual assistant, you need to take a deep breath and decide what you will or won't do, right? Because for better or for worse, yes, our job is to communicate with clients, to support a supervisor, but we can't fix problems that aren't ours to fix, right? And that's incredibly important. And you can't take on tasks that you weren't hired for. Now, once in a blue moon, of course, step up, but make it clear. Say, hey, this is outside the scope of my work, but I am more than happy to step up and take this because I know you're really stressed out. Again, like the mobile groomer who's been rescheduled 4 or 5 times with, let's say, all the snow and they're panicking and they're overwhelmed. You could say, hey, listen, I will handle X, Y, Z for you. Maybe it's all the calls. Maybe it's like, listen, I know we've rescheduled this lady 3 times. I'm going to call her and I'm going to, help you deal with her because I know she's angry. Like maybe you don't deal with angry customers, but you've rescheduled this lady 3 times and she's left a really nasty voicemail. And in your scope of work, you do not deal with problem clients. You might say, you know what? I rescheduled this lady 3 times. I will take this off of your plate for you. Instead of you dealing with this angry lady who rescheduled 3 times, I will do it, and maybe even I will create a script that you can approve before I call them. Right. And again, these are just ways you could take something off of their plate, and it's not a huge thing because there's a balance between being an emotional shock absorber, right? Where every time they're upset, you're just punching you, right? You don't want that. It's not a healthy place for you to be. On the flip side, right? We also can't be the kind of person that, for better or for worse, is the savior in everything. That's not realistic, right? But you can, on little tiny things and little tiny ways, make their life easier. And again, I know it's a balance and it's so different for every person. I think we have to remember as virtual assistants that over functioning is not necessarily professionalism, right? Being the superhero who does every single little thing and it takes everything off of their plate isn't about being professional. It's about us dealing with our own personal trauma of either people pleasing or feeling like we need to save everyone, right? We need to take good care of us because if you have 5 or 6 clients and now you're over extending yourself for 5 clients, you are going to burn yourself out. And then how are you going to be emotionally regulated for your clients, right? Your supervisor, if you have nothing left to give them, right? Because they're stressed out. They need you to be emotionally regulated. And I know that is a hard task, right? And I want to make it clear, boundaries don't make you mean. I always say to be unclear is to be unkind. And that's really important. This is why we make policies and procedures. We make policies and procedures for what's best for the business. If you would like, for Christmas, for example, for Christmas, if you want to have different boundaries, different procedures, fine. But this is what I've been hired to do. If you would like me to do more things, I'm happy to take on more tasks if we agree upon it, right? And we can go back to square one. But again, it's so important for you to stay within the scope, within what you have agreed to do. Because if you guys know the cute little, I don't know if it's a nursery rhyme, but it's a kid's song. And it goes, hi, my name is Joe, and I work in a button factory. One day, my boss came to me and he said, Joe, are you busy? And I said, no. Well, then press that button with your right hand. Hi, my name is Joe. And, through the entire song, it's like you do your right hand, you do your left hand, you do your elbow, you do your other elbow, you're doing your legs, you're doing your head, you're pressing the buttons with all of your body. And at the very end, when your whole body is like wiggling like a crazy person, the boss comes to you and says, are you busy? And you scream yes, and you fall to the ground. And I think that's a perfect example of what's going to happen to everybody. When your boss says to you, are you busy? Instead of saying no or yes, ask yourself, is this outside the scope of what I do? And what can I do? What are your scheduled hours, right? What are the systems in place, right? And again, it's always up to you. You can always say, if they ask you, hey, can you do X, Y, Z? You can say, well, that's a decision that you'll need to make, and I can support it maybe once, or, we can add that into next month's contract, or would you like that to be an add-on, however you choose to run your business? Because your supervisor may not know what they're asking is outside of the scope of their work. And that's where too, when you are creating your list of services, I really suggest that you decide what is or is not within the scope of that work, right? Because again, the example I use is, let's say, copy for a website. So designing a website, let's say you are in charge of designing a website. Okay, well, does that mean designing the actual pictures and collecting all of the framework of that website? Or does it mean creating all of the writing? Because it's actually three jobs there, right? So job one is layout, marketing, right? What is going to be included as far as pages goes? How does that then flow from marketing, etc.? Two is the actual framework of the website, and now we have so many templates, it's a fairly easy job depending upon what they want, but they want something custom that can cost a lot more. And then three is what they call copy, which is the actual words on the website. And when you have things like this, when you have this kind of website where, for better, for worse, somebody thinks they're paying you to do something. So in this instance, if I were having somebody, a supervisor, hire me to do a website, I would say, okay, so my job is literally just designing the website. It is not, marketing strategy. And I would list out what that would be and maybe a price if I were to do it, or other contractors they could hire. And then copy, I'd say this does not include copy. Copy costs this. And this is other contractors, if you don't want to hire me, who I would suggest. Right? Or they could be the one to have the copy. And this is very important too when we're doing our VA stuff, because it's going to help us create those boundaries. We're going to say, hey, remember when I said that I do this, but I don't do that? Now you can see it, right? It's going to help you protect your energy. It's going to create more clarity and respect. It's going to help you be more professional, because instead of you flipping out one day and saying, like, this isn't even my job, right? It's going to allow you to communicate through your little framework, right? And that's going to help you with your longevity at work. The truth is that the right clients will respect this. They're going to understand. They're going to say, you know what, you're right. I understand that this is what you do and you do not do. And they're going to decide whether or not they're going to invest in that. And that's not up to you, that's up to them. So remember, there's the difference between being professional support and emotional spend, right? You are not an emotional shock absorber, but yes, learning how to emotionally regulate yourself is going to be a game changer for you. Learning how to, when a groomer is having a mini meltdown, you can stay stable. And because you've been in the grooming industry, you know that sometimes when they're having this meltdown, it's nothing to do with you. It's the dog that they had to shave that was covered in fleas, or the dog that's come in every single time with a massive ear infection, or a dog that came in and they know this is the last dog's groom, or the client that, yelled at them for something. You know that it's the stress of being physically exhausted. So you have a unique perspective. So you can be emotionally regulated. And no, I'm not saying take abuse, but you can stand firm with gentleness when things like that happen. And you can point back to what you've done. You can be very calm, right? Again, I'm not saying that people should overstep boundaries, but the most important thing is that you need to stay in your lane as a virtual assistant, manage the systems, bring them back to what they've agreed to, and don't let their roller coasters of emotions take you to crazy places. Remember not to rush into rescuing them. You are not Superman. Your job is not to save them. Your job is to help them keep on the path that they have already agreed to. And if they would like to renegotiate those terms, you are more than happy to be there. And of course, if they need a little extra support, that's fine. You can use some neutral language. Again, being professional isn't cold. I know in the grooming industry, this can come off very cold and uncaring, but professionalism should be seen as being grounded, right? An example of some ways of being grounded and professional while not being super dismissive. I know it might sound a little dismissive, and I think that's a lot of us internalizing it. Things like, that's outside my scope, but here's what I can do, or I'll respond to that during my normal scheduled hours. I can help you with these XYZ, whatever it is, but I'm feeling like this is more, I wouldn't say emotional situation, but you can say something along the lines of, is this a solutions-based conversation or a feelings-based conversation, right? Do you need to feel heard or do you want to create a solution? Some people will find that very offensive, and that's because, for better or for worse, they want it to be both. And it's really important that if they want a feelings conversation, you can say, listen, I'm happy to listen to your feelings for 5 to 10 minutes, but as a professional, as your virtual assistant, I have to set boundaries because, we are in a professional setting. And it's so important, guys. Like, again, it's this heightened emotional state. And you'll see this a lot of times with your supervisor and their employees. Their employees will be in this emotionally heightened state. And because your supervisor is not emotionally regulated, they just end up yelling at each other. They start screaming at each other. They start saying things that are completely emotionally situational. Things like, you don't care about me, you don't appreciate me, right? Those are not truly professional feelings, right? Because they're not solution based, they are emotion based, which, again, we're not robots. We're not people that are like, oh, this is what I do, right? We're people, and that's okay. But I think what's the most important thing is to say, okay, am I being emotional? Am I being rational? And again, there's nothing wrong with being emotional, but you're not being paid, right? You're not being paid to be their therapist. You're not being paid to sit there and hold their hand, unless if you are. A business coach is more of that person, right? It's really important that you don't make yourself their emotional crutch. So again, and if they stand behind or if they ask your opinion about something, and again, that question, that opinion is outside of your scope, I really suggest again that you say something like, that's the decision you need to make, and I can support it once you've made it. If they say, well, what would you do? What would you do? To be like, I'm not a business coach. I do not feel comfortable making that decision. This is the decision you have to make. And once you make it, I'm happy to support you. And that's really going to help you stay in this industry long term, because otherwise you're going to be burnt out within 6 months. You're going to feel a little resentful, and you're going to constantly think about, what am I doing with myself? Because now you're basically doing all the heavy lifting of somebody else's business, which, let's be honest, like, the one of the reasons you became a virtual assistant is because you don't want the pressure and the responsibility of owning a growing business. So we're going to make sure that we're going to take good care of ourselves as we move into shave down season. And I'm so excited that we're going to be able to really enjoy that. I know it's been so cold in so many parts of the United States, crazy, crazy, crazy snow. And listen, it all works out in the end. So don't worry, don't panic, just enjoy yourself. If this episode hit a little too close to home, I want you to know something. You're not doing it wrong, and you're not doing too much, okay? You want to make sure that you are taking care of you, and that's the most important thing. You can always find more clients, you can always make more money. You can't make another you, and your mental health is so important, and you're worth it, okay? So if you have already considered becoming a virtual assistant, I want you to know that I'm so excited that we have officially released the new and improved Virtual Grooming Assistant Fundamentals version 2.0. So this course has been rebuilt to sustainability in mind, and it's just how to become a virtual assistant into the pet industry. So if you're thinking about coming into this work and you're thinking about how to do it without being burnt out or functioning or absorbing stress that isn't yours, consider joining the Virtual Assistants Fundamentals 2.0. And again, this is going to focus on clarifying your roles and scopes as a VA, building professional boundaries that actually stick, understanding what is or is not your responsibility, supporting groomers without becoming their emotional safety net, and creating systems that protect your time, energy, and ultimately your longevity. Now, if you're ready to stop white knuckling your career and start building something that feels stable, professional, and sustainable, you can check out the Virtual Grooming Assistant Fundamentals 2.0 course at stepawayfromthetable.com/VA. So guys, as always, step away from the table, look at the bigger picture, and remember, you deserve that supports you too. I'll see you all next time.
Thanks for joining me on Step Away from the Table, Beyond the Table. If today's episode sparked something in you, don't forget to follow, share, or leave a review. It helps more groomers like you find their next step. You don't have to do this alone, but you get to do it your way. Until next time, take a deep breath and keep moving forward.